Hi guys, it's Carissa and I am filming my week 32 video. I turned 33 weeks yesterday and I can't even keep up with the time. I'm starting to feel a little frantic because I feel like I need to work as long as I can. So at least for 3 to 4 more weeks, I think I'd like to try and work. But by the time I'm done working, I'm dead to the world. I have such a hard time doing anything else. I put all of my energy and effort into getting through the workday, and some days it's harder than others. So anyway, let's talk about week 32. I feel bad because these videos lately have become story time about 1 or 2 major events that happened throughout the week. But I think that's pregnancy. I think that's just how it goes. It gets more and more eventful towards the end. So I will tell you about that, about what happened this week. The only thing I really wrote down about what I was feeling is that I've noticed lately I've just been having trouble understanding spatial relationships when it comes to my belly. I feel like, especially because some days I do feel normal and fine and I'm not achy or anything, it's hard for me to sit at my desk and work because I feel like I should be able to get closer to the desk and I can't. And when I'm doing dishes, sometimes my back starts to hurt and my belly starts to hurt because I find myself like really pressing to get closer to the sink, and I can't get closer to the sink. So it's kind of like I have to remind myself of that. And I don't know. I think a lot of it has to do with the position that the baby is in because she keeps flipping. Sorry, the cat just shook everything. The baby keeps flipping between breech and transverse. So very early in the week, I think it was Wednesday, I went for what I'm supposed to have every 4 weeks is a follow-up NST, which is a non-stress test, and an ultrasound. And these are just precautionary to make sure that I don't develop preeclampsia and not know it. And my blood pressure has been great throughout the duration of the pregnancy. I haven't had to up my medication at all. It's still high, but it's even a little bit for me, but it's still okay. It's normally about 120 or 130 over 80 or 90. Those are the numbers that we kind of are hoping to hear every time we go to the appointment, and that's usually what it is. These are both done in the same office, on 2 different sides of the office. And the first time I went, I had the NST scheduled, and then after that was done, I went to the ultrasound. But this time, the ultrasound was first. Let me tell you, I am so glad the ultrasound was first. I was worried about it because ultrasounds can tend to go for quite a while, especially when the baby is not in an ideal position. So, which is what the case was the previous time we went. So I was a little nervous about having that first because I didn't want it to run into my time for the NST and then throw their schedule off for the whole day. It's not even something that I need to worry about that badly, but for some reason I don't know, I was stressed about it, and then became very thankful after the fact because we saw her. She was breech and she was facing me. So all we could get a picture of was her spine. That's the only picture I took home that day was her spine. I never got to see her face, barely got to see, I didn't see her arms or anything. Barely got to see any part of her body other than her spine and one of her leg bones. But the technician said that the amniotic fluid looked great and that she was in the 50th percentile. She weighed 3.15 pounds, which is just under 4 pounds. And she was right on track and everything looked good. Her heart rate was 140, and that was all we could get out of that appointment. And that was fine. It's always great to see her, even if we're only seeing a little bit of her. Mike left to go back to work, and I went in for the NST. And I had a new technician from the one that I had the previous time, and I don't want to say anything bad about her, but she has a strange, maybe she was having a bad day. I don't know. The technician was acting a little bit strange, and she was having a really hard time finding the baby. And I can tell sometimes when I feel like maybe I'm being judged for being obese, and I was getting a little bit of a reading on that maybe that was the case. And you know, there isn't anything that's much more humiliating than being gigantically huge in your midsection, pregnant or not. I'm a very big girl, especially in my belly. And having someone need to strap things to your belly while it's completely exposed and while they're sort of looking at you like they hate you. So I don't know how much that affected what was going on, but she could not find the heartbeat at all. And she kept saying, which was a little bit frustrating to me and a little bit disheartening, she kept saying, well, we know it's in there, you just saw it. Well, it is my daughter, and I'm starting to get concerned, so could we please lighten this up a little bit, you know? She tried, the first woman found the heartbeat in less than 30 seconds. This woman, even though I told her where the baby was, because we had just seen her in the ultrasound, was looking in strange places and kind of ignoring my instruction, and had to finally go speak to the girl who did the ultrasound to ask for help finding the heartbeat. And so she gave her a little bit of an idea of where to find it. And it still took a while, but we did eventually. And then it just felt very awkward after that. But it was also different because the first woman asked me to hold down the, I don't know, the little probe thing. And this woman didn't want me to. And even when I would recommend that maybe I do it to give her a break, she would seem frustrated and tell me no. So I don't know if it's something they don't like for you to do, but it did have to, just because of the way she was positioned, it did have to be pressed into my stomach a little bit to actually hear the heartbeat. And I wasn't given the little thumb button this time to mark whenever she moved. I guess they didn't need me to do that this time around. I don't know. So I had the NST, and she took my blood pressure after the fact and said everything looked great. She didn't tell me what my blood pressure was, but she didn't remark on it at all either. And I went on my way. She was very apologetic because once we found the heartbeat and got talking, I think she relaxed a little bit and maybe felt guilty for the way that she was reacting when I first walked in the room. And she was very nice, but it was just a very awkward situation. And you know how sometimes you just don't mesh well with people? Like, everything you say, they don't understand you quite, and they take it wrong, or you start to talk at the same time they do every single time. So there's this awkward moment of like, no, you go ahead. No, you say what you were saying. So I kind of hope that that was my last interaction with her, but if it's not, that's perfectly fine. But my OB was going to see me on Thursday, and Mike has Thursdays off typically, so he wanted to come with me and meet her. And okay, I am not complaining about my husband because he's the best husband that ever was. I would put him in a competition up against any other husband in the world and say he's the best. I love him so much, and I think that I can't, it's hard for me to think of a reason to complain about him ever. But knowing he wanted to go with me was stressing me out for some reason. I don't know if it was because I was afraid he wouldn't like the doctor or something was gonna go wrong. I don't know, I just had a bad feeling about it, and I kept trying to excuse him from coming. I also think that it was a perfect storm being set up for a bad appointment, and I haven't had one yet, so I don't know why I was so convinced that this appointment was going to go poorly, and it did. So to start it off, I probably did very briefly mention that I was having this swelling in my upper lip again. It was a lot more noticeable, and that the skin was feeling sort of dry and bumpy. It was like a severe chapped lip sort of thing. And the morning of my appointment, which another mistake I made was I had the appointment in the afternoon. It was at 2:30. And I prefer morning appointments just because I can go and then have the rest of the day to do what I need to do at my own pace. But when I have an appointment in the middle of the afternoon, you know, there's only so much you can do to get ready and get things done beforehand. I don't know, to me, there's the traffic is different and all of that, and you don't know if you're gonna be late, so I don't like to have afternoon appointments if I can help it. So that morning I noticed that my lips were extra swollen, more than usual. And I don't experience swelling anywhere else, not in my ankles or my hands. I really don't feel, and my breasts aren't even that swollen. So it was strange to me, and I was starting to develop little bumps on my lip. Well, I always feel foolish for not having a question to ask her when I go there. So I thought, all right, this time I should definitely at least mention, even though it's probably just something that happens in pregnancy to some women and it's not worth mentioning, I'll do it just so that, I just ask her if she has an opinion on that or if there's something that she thinks I should do for it. Another thing is that I was weighing myself every day, and I hadn't, probably in the last week and a half, stepped on the scale at all. And so it occurred to me that day that there was a chance that I weighed a lot more, and even though she's been very quick to brush off my weight issues, and I've asked her, I'm really concerned about how quickly I'm gaining weight and how much weight I've gained, and she just really doesn't, she treats it like it's a non-issue. But that day I was convinced it's going to be a problem, mainly because I had been pretty constipated. The food was going in and nothing was really coming out, and I mean, if I did have any kind of bowel movements, they were very minimal. I was thinking about asking her about it, but that's another thing. I don't know, I just feel like there isn't much that can be done in that situation. There's not really much I can take or anything, so I just figured that's just something that's a part of pregnancy also. But just so that it wouldn't completely blindside me, I weighed myself about 20 minutes before I had to go to my appointment. And it said I was up from the previous week 10 pounds. Now that's my home scale, and that's the middle of the day, and I've already had breakfast and lunch and lots of water. I drink 2 or 3 of these by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I know that a lot of doctors take into consideration, at least my primary does, they kind of act like your weight doesn't really matter after 11 or 12 o'clock because it's that time of day. So I tried not to worry about it too much, but I was stressing. I also should mention that I take medications for my blood pressure 3 times a day, in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And my dose for the afternoon is typically about 2:30. Because that's when my appointment was, I decided to take the pills right when I was walking out the door. But I'm sure my blood pressure becomes a little bit more elevated just before my next dose. Maybe not. Maybe that's just something that I'm making an assumption about. But I'm just trying to paint a picture for you of all of the things that were stacked against me before I walked in the door to this appointment. Mike and I went to leave, and now every time he wants to come with me to an appointment, I'm late. And I don't like being late for appointments. I like to be 15 minutes early, like 12 to 15 minutes early, I think is good. Or at least I like to leave early enough so that that's hopefully when I get there, because you never know what's going to happen with traffic and things. So he does not have that same philosophy. He always leaves so much later, and then I feel so stressed out and feel guilty about being late. And, I told you, I worry about the rest of their day and being that patient. So we're driving there, and he is going 30 where you can go 45. And we're already running a little bit late. So I was like, are you okay? Are you daydreaming or something? Because you're driving really slow. And normally I am the speed police where I'm always telling him he's going too fast. So I was like, honey, are you okay? Because you're driving really slow. He was like, well, all the recycling's in the back of the truck and I don't want it to blow around. So I had to try really hard to just find a zen place in my mind and not say anything, because I was so frustrated. Like, why did we take this vehicle then if we were going to have to drive at a snail's pace to this appointment and potentially be late? It turned out we weren't. I think we had like 5 minutes before the appointment when we walked in. But it's safe to say I was pretty riled up. And all of those things, my weight, the constipation, the swelling in my face, work, bills, Mike driving too slow, all of that stuff was piled up in my head. So I walked into the appointment and they weighed me, and it was the same weight as at home. And when I had my blood pressure taken, the nurse said, "It's kind of high. Is that normal for you?" Now, my normal is high by most standards, you know? So I said, well, it depends on what that means. And she said it is 160 over 90. And I was like, yeah, that's a little high for me. That's higher than what it's been. And she said, okay, we'll recheck you before you leave. So we went into the room, and when the doctor came in, the first thing she asked me was if I had any questions. And I knew something's not right, because that's what she says at the end of the appointment. And she has a very methodical way that she goes through everything. So I said, well, yes, I've noticed that there's been a little bit of swelling in my lips. And before I even had a chance to tell her that it's been like bumpy and chapped, she said, yes, if you're experiencing swelling, that goes along with some of the other things that I'm concerned about. And she said, you are 10 pounds heavier than you were the last time you were here 2 weeks ago, and your blood pressure is high today. And before I had a chance to say, they were saying that I could have it checked again before I leave, she told me, yeah, I need you to go to the hospital because I'm concerned that you may have turned the corner and you may now have preeclampsia. And I have told you guys in the past, I'm a good patient. I don't argue. I don't even stand up for myself sometimes when I feel like I should. I'm very agreeable. And what matters most is my little girl and making sure that if anything is wrong, she's taken care of. So I even though I was convinced that she was wrong, I was not going to argue with her, because if it could at any point hurt or affect my baby, that's not cool. So that wasn't even a thought in my head, but I also was kind of screaming on the inside like, no, this is not what you think it is. I know you're the doctor, but I know me. So I didn't say any of that, of course. I was very agreeable. I'm actually surprised I didn't burst into tears. I held it together pretty well. So she said, here are the 3 things that are going to likely happen today. You'll go and you'll be monitored, and the most likely scenario is that they will adjust your medications and send you home. The next most likely, but it's not as likely, is that they will ask to keep you there for a few days to observe you for 3 or 4 days. And then the least likely, but that is still a possibility, is that you will have to deliver today. So Mike's sitting behind me in this room, and I could just feel the air get completely different in the room. If he hadn't soiled himself, he was close to it. She looked at Mike and said, I'm glad you were here today, and go to the hospital. They'll be expecting you. So we got there, and my blood pressure was 128 over 75. And they hooked me up to do an NST, and it was fine. Now, I will tell you, it took them a really long time to find the baby, to find the heartbeat, and that was really scary, even though we had just heard it less than an hour before at the doctor's office. She did a belly check, and she played the heart rate, and she said it was 140, just like the day before. But they had a really hard time finding her. The first nurse that tried couldn't. The second nurse that tried, and so each nurse had some kind of an intern with her. So there were 2 people in the room when she first tried. Then she called another woman in. That woman came in with her intern, or I'm not even sure. I don't mean to talk down about them and assume they're interns if they were something else, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Resident, I don't know. I don't watch Grey's Anatomy. So the second woman came and she's like, oh, she's got a better machine. So she comes in, she couldn't find it. And then they said, oh, so-and-so is really good. She does it all the time. So she called this other girl, and none of the people were leaving the room, though. So every time someone else was called in, the other people remained in the room, and it was getting real tight in there. And that girl, for some reason, the third one, scared me to death. She was acting like something was wrong. She had it written all over her face, and she was making really strange small talk, asking us if we knew if it was a girl or a boy, asking us what her name was, and then she would repeat some of the questions like she hadn't fully been listening because something was worrying her. Mike basically stopped breathing at that point, and I was trying to make suggestions of where they should look And they claimed a couple of times they could see where her skull was, but they still couldn't find her heartbeat. They were using an actual ultrasound machine on like a laptop on a cart, which I've never seen, like a little mini ultrasound setup, to do that so that they could tell her where to put the probe for the NST. Then they called a doctor in, and he came in with an extra person. And all these people are standing in the room. And thank goodness that doctor found it right away. He was like, oh, heartbeat's right there, baby's transverse. So she had turned since the day before, and since an hour before when I was at that appointment, she had turned into a transverse position, kind of diagonally. And everybody in the room seemed like they sighed a big breath of relief, including Mike. And Mike was like, very funny, guys. And they were like, oh no, we knew she was in there. We just couldn't find her heartbeat. So they were very defensive, but it looked an awful lot like everyone was in there just waiting to hear terrible news. So that was no fun. But my blood pressure was still good after that, because they actually didn't check it until after they found her heart rate. Oh, also, there was no protein in my urine at my doctor's office, but they still checked it again at the hospital. They only checked my blood pressure the one time. They only ran the one NST. They said that your urine is clear of protein, but we have to check it for 24 hours. So I had to do that thing where I feel like I've known a lot of people that have had to do this, where they've had to collect their urine for a 24-hour period and in big medical jugs and then bring it for testing the next day. So I went home, I did that, I was happy to. She didn't say anything to me today, and I got a lab report in my online MyChart, and it looked like they said there was no protein at all in both jugs of urine. So I know she was just being cautious, and I appreciate that. And bless Mike, because he was almost a little bit bummed out for the next day or so, because he kept saying, I was kind of hoping we were going to have a baby today. And I had to gently remind him every time he said that that's not ideal, that that's not what we want. I know you're excited to meet her. I'm excited too, but she's not done baking yet. So that is it for week 32. I guess I don't have much more to say, and I have a lot of stuff to get to, so I'm going to go do that now. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.